こいつも仲間か。いや、私はオズと関係ない。やめろ。
What if the every better choice we thought of only leads to another same disappointing outcome, and that perfect situation we always wanted ceased to exist at all? You try to curate your life, waiting for the perfect moment or person that will never come. You exhaust yourself chasing better choices, only to end up in the same situation, and you get so tired of the disappointment that you eventually start locking yourself in your own room, alone, only to find yourself trapped in an infinite number of rooms, where every possible version of you exists, each one representing the life you could have lived, realizing that no matter what choices you make, life will always contain imperfections. This isn't just a thought experiment, it is the very reality the unnamed protagonist of the Tatami Galaxy is forced to confront. After watching the Tatami Galaxy for the first time, it felt less like viewing an anime, and more like walking through my fever dream. I really have no idea what was actually happening, and way too chaotic for me to understand at all. I even tried looking up explanations online, but honestly, it still didn't click. It wasn't until I finally sat down and rewatched it recently that it all finally fell into place. And looking back, I realized I finally understand what it was trying to say.
あるいはもっと有意義な人生があったかもしれない。もっとバラ色で、もっと光り輝いていて。
The anime begins with the first appearance of the so-called God of Matchmaking. He introduces himself to the unnamed protagonist at a ramen shop, claiming that he knows him very well. He then tells the protagonist that he intends to help him get closer to the girl he likes, Akashi, a beautiful yet often cold engineering student on whom he has a crush. To be honest, the entire opening sequence for me feels intentionally overwhelming. Everything moves at an incredibly fast pace, from the conversations to the animation, making it difficult to know where I should even be looking. What became clear to me, however, was that this seemingly incomprehensible narrative was probably a reflection of the protagonist's own confused state of mind. He's desperately trying to figure out which choices will finally lead him to the rose-colored campus life he longs for. And that desire only grows stronger after he convinces himself that joining the tennis circle during his freshman year is the very reason he's still trapped in the same stagnant and unfulfilling life. It is within this club that he meets Ozu, a malevolent, fanged, and mischievous fellow student whom the protagonist considers his worst friend. The protagonist also encounters an old fortune teller who advises him to seize the opportunities dangling before him. She warns that while changing paths may solve one problem, it will inevitably replace it with another kind of disappointment. She then asks him for 1,000 yen in return, which, for me, is one of the funniest repeating moments in the series. In each succeeding episode, the protagonist returns to the start of his freshman year, where he chooses a different student club in the hope that this time he will finally achieve the ideal college life he longs for. This cycle continues until episode 9, with every timeline introducing a different club and a different version of the life he lives, while retaining many of the same characters, in which I believe that these episodes represent the many possible realities he has created by each different decision he makes in pursuit of his rose-colored campus life. From what I observed, Ozu seemingly becomes the source of the protagonist's misfortunes in nearly every timeline. The God of Matchmaking also reappears throughout the series, although his role differs from episode to episode. Rather than serving a single fixed purpose, he acts as a recurring anchor who subtly influences the protagonist's circumstances, regardless of which club he joins. Likewise, Akashi remains closely connected to him across every timeline, while the old fortune teller repeatedly reminds him to seize the opportunities before him. As a running gag, the fee she charges for her fortune steadily increases with each encounter. Based on the progression of the story, the protagonist is never truly content with his circumstances. Whenever the outcome of one choice fails to satisfy him, he immediately begins imagining how much better his life could have been had he chosen a different path instead. Another detail I noticed is that each episode ends with the clock rapidly spinning backward. which I interpreted as symbolizing the protagonist being given another chance to pursue the life he desires. In the final episodes, after repeatedly arriving at the same disappointing conclusion, he grows exhausted by the endless cycle and ultimately locks himself inside his own 4.5 tatami room. It is here that he begins to realize what he should have been pursuing all along, instead of obsessing over the idea of a rose-colored campus life. Because he discovers that he is physically trapped, whenever he attempts to escape, whether through the door, the window, or even by breaking through the walls or ceiling, he always ends up inside another identical 4.5 tatami room. But later, he realizes that the rooms are not truly identical. Each one differs slightly, representing a different reality, or what-if scenario, based on the choices he could have made throughout his college life. Trapped within this endless maze, he is forced to confront the lives he abandoned, in which I feel a little bit of melancholia, since like him, I realize how many meaningful experiences I overlooked by refusing to appreciate the imperfect opportunities and relationships that had always been right in front of me. After realizing what he had let go, he then eventually returns to the real world on the night of the Gaozan Festival, the very same night depicted in the first episode, after finally noticing the Mochigumen keychain dangling from the light in his room, wherein, in every previous timeline, he had either ignored it or failed to return it to Akashi. This moment suggests that the old fortune teller's advice had been correct all along. The opportunity he had been searching for was never hidden. It had always been right before him. By the end of the series, he no longer sees Ozu as a malevolent demon, but as a vulnerable and insecure friend. Likewise, he no longer views Akashi as an untouchable ideal, but as someone he can genuinely approach. In a final act of agency, he saves Ozu from falling and finally returns the keychain to Akashi, taking the first genuine step toward building the relationship he had spent so long imagining instead of pursuing. After watching it, I felt that Masaki Yuasa, the director, challenges the illusionary nature of how most people perceive life through this anime. It was not solely created to appeal to anime viewers like the shoujo or shonen ones, but to leave a deep lesson towards its viewers. One commendable detail I noticed that could probably prove it is that the protagonist is never given a distinct name, suggesting that he could represent anyone who stumbles upon the series, making it easier for viewers to project themselves onto him and recognize that his experiences, struggles, and desires are universal, making its idea even more comprehensible. Another thing is that although Ozu is introduced as the protagonist's friend, I interpreted him as the physical manifestation of the protagonist's self-hatred and negativity toward himself. The repeating line about them being bound together by a black thread of fate symbolizes that he can never escape the part of himself that constantly sabotages his own happiness unless he learns to accept himself, especially his insecurities and flaws. Remarkably, the Mochigumen keychain that is always hanging in front of him, yet always goes unnoticed and is never returned to Akashi, serves as a reminder that we often search for opportunities somewhere far away. And just like the protagonist, I think the greatest illusion people create for themselves is believing that the satisfaction they seek exists beyond the life they already have. That if only they had chosen a different university, degree, career, friends, or even a different home, their lives would finally feel fulfilling. But in reality, life rarely unfolds the way we imagine. You eventually realize that our circumstances do not need to be perfect for life to be meaningful. Instead, you must learn to live with imperfection, because in many cases, the happiness you have been searching for has been quietly waiting in front of you all along. That is what the Tatami Galaxy tells us. Fate is not something you can completely dictate, but something you eventually have to accept, because no matter how carefully you plan your life, there will always be things out of your control. You often convince yourself that perfection exists somewhere in the future, that the perfect opportunity, the perfect decision, or the perfect version of yourself is still waiting to be found. But it is a myth, because in reality, all things are not perfect. The future is uncertain by nature. It is unknown and unpredictable. Every decision you make carries the possibility of failure, regret, and disappointment. Yet, those moments are not meaningless. They shape who you are, teach us what truly matters, and lead us toward a different perspective of life. Perhaps that is why people say that everything happens for a reason, not because every event is destined or fair, but because every experience has the potential to teach us something if we are willing to accept it. Because in the end, happiness is rarely found in the perfect future we keep imagining. More often than not, it begins the moment we stop searching for another life and start making the most of the one we already have.
何の修行なのですか？
人生一寸先は闇である。我々はその底知れぬ闇の中から自分の益となるものを誤たず掴み出さねばならない。